pregnant wife arrives at the hospital for emergency care, Billionaire chooses Mistress over her. Life can spin on a dime, hurling us into moments that test our deepest loyalties and hidden desires. Charlotte Hastings, heavily pregnant and teetering on the edge of crisis, stumbles into an emergency room with hopes pinned on her husband's unwavering support. Instead, she collides with a shocking betrayal, her wealthy husband, Peter Hastings, standing protectively beside another woman. How did a marriage that once sparkled with champagne dreams fall into such treacherous waters? The next few hours inside Ridgeway General Hospital will unravel twisted secrets and ignite a high-stakes battle of love, power, and deceit. Stay tuned, everything is about to change. Charlotte Hastings had sensed something was off in her marriage long before she found herself panting in the backseat of the car, one hand pressed against her distended belly and the other gripping the seat cushion. Yet she never envisioned the night she went into labor would mark the climax of all her worst fears. She was exhausted from the continuous Braxton Hicks contractions she had been experiencing for weeks, but this time she knew it wasn't a false alarm. A sharp wave of pain clenched her abdomen, nearly buckling her in half. Despite everything, her sweaty brow, her labored breaths, the unyielding fear of giving birth, prematurely her mind couldn't shake the unsettling memory of Peter's odd behavior that morning. Peter Hastings was a handsome man of 35 who had built a small empire from a single software startup. Born and raised in the outskirts of Redwood City, Peter had defied the odds. He rose from a modest background to become CEO of Hastings Innovations, a leading name in cybersecurity solutions. He was rich, driven, and widely respected in business circles. But the man who once slipped love notes in Charlotte's lunches had changed drastically over the past few months. He often came home late, emanating a faint whiff of perfume that wasn't hers, spouting vague excuses about emergency meetings or after-work events. Tonight, Charlotte had been alone in their sprawling mansion on Birchwood Lane, feeling a dull ache in her back and that uneasy sense of being unmoored. When her water broke unexpectedly, she dashed off frantic calls to Peter's phone, but he wasn't answering. Terrified, she rang her friend Kathy Summers from Glendale, who was visiting Charlotte's older sister in the city. Kathy arrived just in time to help Charlotte, coaxing her into the back of Peter's Silver. Mercedes Kathy had managed to find the car keys tossed on the hall table. Together, they sped off into the stormy night. The drive to Ridgeway General Hospital should have been quick, but a sudden downpour turned the roads slick as glass. Kathy's knuckles were white around the steering wheel, and Charlotte's pale face pressed against the cold window. She hoped beyond hope that Peter would arrive, that he would answer his phone or sense her distress, that he'd be waiting for her in the ER with the old reassuring smile she had fallen in love with. Instead, as they pulled up to the emergency entrance, Kathy gasped. There, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, was Peter standing with an elegant woman with auburn hair and wearing a fitted black coat. Their body language spoke volumes. The woman's fingers lightly rested on Peter's arm, their heads angled toward each other with an intimacy that sent cold chills through Charlotte. "What on earth is going on?" Kathy muttered, voice tinged with disbelief. But Charlotte was already breathing heavily, her mind swirling with panic. Why was Peter here with her? Who was that woman? Her heart hammered as she forced open the car door and stepped out, a crack of lightning illuminating the stormy sky behind them. The hospital staff bustled around the entrance, oblivious to the confrontation about to unravel before their eyes. Charlotte needed Peter, his steady presence, his comfort, but something in the depth of his gaze, as it flicked from her to the mystery woman, made her stomach roil even more than her contractions. And as she staggered onto the slick pavement, she saw the woman's lips form the words, "I'm staying with you tonight, Peter." Amidst another wave of searing pain, Charlotte felt her knees threaten to buckle. Kathy rushed around to support her. A nurse by the doors, Nurse Elaine Patterson, quickly wheeled a gurney out to help. Charlotte managed to lock eyes with Peter, the shock painting her face. Before Charlotte could speak, the woman placed a proprietary hand on Peter's shoulder. This was how Charlotte first encountered Eliza Kent, the woman she had suspected but tried to deny existed. Tall, with high cheekbones and an expensive aura of confidence, Eliza looked every inch the mistress. Charlotte had always dreaded. Peter, looking sheepish yet brazen, grabbed Eliza's hand. The final dagger to Charlotte's heart. He didn't reach out to comfort his wife, the mother of his unborn child, but instead shielded Eliza from the downpour. In that moment, Charlotte felt her world collapse around her. Even the fierce contractions were drowned out by the tidal wave of heartbreak. Kathy's outrage reverberated in the night air, but Charlotte barely heard it. She was whisked inside by hospital staff, leaving Peter and Eliza behind. Inside the bright emergency ward, the smell of antiseptic was sharp and clinical. The fluorescent lighting flickered slightly, giving the chaotic hallway an eerie hum. Charlotte was placed on a hospital bed, and her immediate physical crisis resumed center stage. She was only 34 weeks pregnant, too early for a smooth delivery. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, the obstetrician on duty, appeared by her side, her voice calm but urgent. Monitoring equipment was quickly attached to Charlotte's belly, measuring fetal heart rate, while the medical team began discussing the risk of preterm labor. And still, Charlotte's eyes kept darting to the door. Would Peter walk in? Would he stand by her side? Could he possibly choose that other woman, while his wife, his pregnant wife, was in this precarious state? For a few minutes, no sign of Peter. Charlotte's despair deepened as she recalled the hush-hush phone calls he'd been making for months. She had tried to trust him, tried to ignore the warning bells. She wanted her perfect marriage, the one she had always dreamed of after her own parents had divorced. She never wanted to repeat the heartbreak she witnessed as a child. Now, the heartbreak was all hers to bear. At last, Peter stepped in, his face pale. But at his side was Eliza, discreetly tucking her auburn hair behind her ears, glancing around as though she had every right to be there. Kathy, an ever-loyal friend, blocked her approach to Charlotte, fuming as she hissed, "What are you doing here? Back off!" Eliza smirked, hugging her designer coat closer. Peter stepped forward, voice low. "Charlotte, this is a misunderstanding. Let's talk about this later." Charlotte could barely form words through the pain. "Talk about what? My water just broke." "I need you, Peter. Our baby needs you." He hesitated. There was a flicker of genuine worry in his eyes, but then he shot an anxious glance toward Eliza, as though he couldn't break free of her orbit. Something deeper, more complicated than a mere fling, was happening. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion overwhelmed Charlotte. She couldn't process the betrayal further. She needed to focus on the baby. At that moment, Dr. Rodriguez stepped in, firmly asking everyone, except the medical staff, to wait in the corridor. Charlotte cried out for Peter, but he lingered, torn between stepping to her side and following Eliza as she left the room. Each second of hesitation cut deeper into Charlotte's heart. Finally, as if making a cold decision, Peter turned away. Charlotte saw him hurry out into the corridor, presumably to check on Eliza. The door swung shut behind him, leaving Charlotte with tears streaming down her cheeks. She was in labor. Her husband had clearly chosen another woman over her, and she felt impossibly alone in that sanitized, bright hospital room. As the pain in her body escalated, so did the roar of betrayal in her mind. But in this swirl of heartbreak and physical torment, a steely thread of determination wove itself through her spirit. Something had to be done for the sake of her unborn child. She could no longer be the passive, hopeful wife. who just waited for her husband to come to his senses. Even as her body cramped with labor pains, she vowed to uncover the truth and claim her own power, no matter how brutal it might be. Little did she know, the events unfolding tonight were only the beginning of a much darker, far more twisted set of revelations, ones that would shake not just her marriage, but her entire understanding of the man she thought she knew. Rain battered the windows of Ridgeway General Hospital, and thunder rolled across the night sky. Charlotte's contraction pains came in waves, each more frightening than the last. Behind her closed eyelids, she replayed the horrifying image of her husband with another woman's hand on his arm. Each time she tried to chase the thought away, it re-emerged like a cruel taunt. At her side, Kathy Summers refused to budge. Kathy knew Charlotte's entire life story, from their college days where Charlotte studied marketing and dabbled in creative writing, to the night Peter proposed on the patio of a 5-star restaurant. She had seen Charlotte beam with love, plan her dream wedding, buy the perfect house, and cling to the hope that her marriage was unbreakable. Now Kathy silently prayed for strength for her dear friend, offering comfort in the form of a warm squeeze of the hand or a whispered word of encouragement. "Stay calm, breathe," Kathy murmured. "You can get through this. The doctors are here." Charlotte's tears mingled with sweat. She had dreamed of a joyous birth, maybe not free of pain, but certainly not overshadowed by an outright betrayal in front of hospital staff. The room spun slightly, every beep of the fetal monitor pricking her nerve endings, making her even more aware that the baby's life hung in the balance. Kathy stood vigil, stricken by how tiny Charlotte looked on the big hospital bed. Guilt gnawed at Kathy's insides. Had she suspected Peter was cheating? Truthfully, yes, but never in her darkest imaginings had she pictured him so brazen as to flaunt his mistress on the night. Charlotte went into premature labor. Meanwhile, beyond the double doors, Peter Hastings wrestled with a tornado of conflicting emotions. He paced the hallway, shoulders tense, while Eliza, with her arms crossed, observed him with a mixture of impatience and cunning. She was used to getting what she wanted, but tonight's high stakes had left her uneasy. "This is insane," Peter muttered under his breath. "I never wanted Charlotte to find out like this. At least, not while she's in labor, God. What am I even doing?" Eliza raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "You're making the right choice. You've made promises to me too, Peter." He ran a hand through his dark hair, face pinched with worry. "She's my wife. I didn't want. Eliza cut him off, stepping closer, lowering her voice. "You told me yourself. She doesn't understand you anymore. She stifles you. You said you felt trapped. This baby," she paused, her voice softening, "this baby shouldn't be the only reason you stay in a marriage that makes you miserable, right?" Peter's heart pounded. His mind was a jumbled battlefield of fear, guilt, and a twisted sense of excitement for a life that might be free from constraints. He had never intended it to come to this. He didn't want a confrontation in a sterile hospital corridor while Charlotte was in so much pain. But Eliza was right about one thing. He had grown resentful of Charlotte's emotional needs, especially as the pregnancy advanced. He felt suffocated, pinned down by responsibilities he didn't feel ready for. Eliza was his escape, a fresh, enticing possibility that coaxed him with the promise of a future that was thrilling rather than daunting. Yet every time he heard Charlotte's cries from inside the labor room, his conscience struck him like a sledgehammer. He felt nauseous. This wasn't who he was supposed to be. But neither could he break away from the allure of Eliza's unwavering devotion. The tension soared even higher when Dr. Maria Rodriguez came out into the corridor with a grave expression. She recognized Peter from social events. Ridgeway General had hosted a charity gala for one of Peter's philanthropic arms the year before. She knew him as the dedicated, polite husband. But tonight, her eyes flicked with disapproval between him and Eliza. "Mr. Hastings, your wife's labor is progressing more quickly than we'd hoped, given how early she is," Dr. Rodriguez said. "We're considering an emergency intervention if the baby shows signs of distress." Peter's face paled. "Is Charlotte, what can I do?" Dr. Rodriguez's lips thinned. "She's asking for you, specifically. It would be best if you came in to support her." Eliza pressed her nails into her palm, the subtle tension not lost on Dr. Rodriguez. Peter's breath caught in his throat. Eliza's insistent gaze burned into him, but the doctor's words pulled at his paternal duty. Finally, he managed a nod. "I'll see her," he said, though it sounded almost like an apology to Eliza, who stood stone-faced behind him. Inside the labor room, Charlotte was moaning through another contraction. Her entire body felt as though it might break. The lines on the fetal monitor danced erratically. She looked up when Peter entered, her eyes brimming with tears and hurt. Summoning what remained of her strength, she said, "Peter, please stay. I need you to help me get through this." His jaw clenched. She was so vulnerable, her hair matted to her forehead, her cheeks stained with tears. Guilt sliced through him. Slowly, he walked over and took her trembling hand. "I'm here, Doctor." Rodriguez and the nurses hovered, monitoring the progress. For a few fleeting moments, Charlotte felt an inkling of relief. Perhaps, she thought, maybe Peter would come to his senses, realize the magnitude of the situation, and choose their family. The staff administered and the fourth to help slow the labor, hoping to buy precious time for the baby's lungs to develop further. They administered steroids and prepared for any emergency scenario. Tension was thick, and Charlotte clung to Peter's hand like it was her only tether to sanity. Outside in the corridor, Eliza waited, fuming. She didn't like being sidelined, but with the unpredictability of childbirth, her patience teetered. Although she tried to maintain a composed exterior, her mind whirled with the knowledge that her future was on the line. She had sacrificed her public image, risking rumors that swirled around the city about her being Peter Hastings's mistress. If he decided to remain with Charlotte in the face of tragedy, everything she had schemed for would be lost. While Charlotte found fleeting comfort in Peter's presence, the reality of the emotional chasm between them was stark. He kept glancing over his shoulder at the door, as though anticipating Eliza's call. Charlotte, in her heart, knew she was losing him. "Doctor." Rodriguez calmly explained the risks. "Charlotte, your blood pressure is spiking. We're looking at a condition called preeclampsia. We need to stabilize you and ensure the baby remains safe. If your vitals don't improve, an emergency C-section might be necessary." Charlotte's breath caught. Through a haze, she realized how critical the moment was. She turned to Peter, thinking of how they had once brainstormed baby names. He wanted to name a daughter Lillian after his grandmother, or a son Alexander after the Greek conqueror. If the baby was delivered now, their child might spend weeks in the NICU. The entire time, would Peter be by her side? Or would he be with Eliza? The mental anguish only worsened her stress. Machines beeped in alarm, and Kathy shot Peter a fierce glare. Under different circumstances, Charlotte might have clung to a dream of reconciliation. But now, her top priority was the safety of her unborn child. It demanded every ounce of her mental strength. Peter squeezed her hand, murmuring, "Everything will be okay," though his voice was lifeless. Kathy shook her head, disgusted by his half-hearted attempt at reassurance. Even so, Charlotte drew comfort from that small measure of contact. A fleeting thought crossed her mind. Perhaps it was all a misunderstanding. Perhaps the other woman is a colleague or a business partner, someone who was comforting him. But the memories of suspicious phone calls, the expensive gifts that never appeared in Charlotte's closet, the smell of perfume on his collar, they all pointed to the bitter truth. Eliza wasn't just a casual acquaintance. She felt another spasm of pain, more brutal this time. The fetal monitor beeped in increasing tempo, and a nurse rushed in to check. Tensions soared. Something in Charlotte's body was giving way. "Baby's heart rate is dropping," Dr. Rodriguez announced. "We need to move to an operating room right now." Chaos erupted. Nurses unhooked machines, readied Charlotte's bed for transport. Kathy was pushed aside, tears shining in her eyes as she tried to remain supportive. Peter paled, uncertain what to do or where to stand. The unstoppable force of medical urgency propelled them out of the labor room and down the corridor to an operating theater, a swirl of frantic voices and glaring lights. Still in excruciating pain, Charlotte's eyes locked with Peter's one last time before a flurry of scrubs blocked her view. "Please," she whispered in a voice so faint he almost missed it, "please don't abandon me now." And then she was gone, wheeled into the operating room, the doors swinging shut behind her with a resounding clang that echoed in Peter's mind. Behind him, footsteps approached. He turned to see Eliza, her face etched with both concern and frustration. She reached for his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't embrace her either. They stood in tense silence as a single question loomed. Which life would Peter choose for himself? If Charlotte and the baby both survived this crisis, while the doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Charlotte and perform the emergency C-section, the hospital corridors buzzed with anxious energy. The storm outside raged on, throwing lightning across the sky, as if reflecting the turmoil unfolding within these sterile walls. Peter Hastings paced outside the operating room, every so often leaning against the cold tiles to steady himself. His mind replayed the events that led him here. He remembered the early days of his marriage when Charlotte had been his biggest cheerleader as he struggled to get Hastings' innovations off the ground. She believed in him long before the investors did, even pouring her modest inheritance into his venture. He had promised her the world in return. Somewhere along the line, success had swept him into a whirlwind of power and possibilities. The demands of his company consumed him, pulling him into a world of lavish parties, sophisticated clients, and deals sealed in exclusive clubs. Charlotte, with her quiet intelligence and cautious optimism, seemed content to support him from the background. But once she became pregnant, something shifted in their dynamic. He felt suffocated by the idea of fatherhood. The notion that he was about to lose his freedom felt like a chain tightening around his neck. He told himself that Charlotte had changed, that she no longer understood his ambitions. It was in this restless state of dissatisfaction that Eliza Kent first appeared, stepping into his office with a captivating smile and an enticing proposition for a business collaboration. A freelance corporate consultant with a keen sense for marketing, she brought the sparkle of novelty that Peter felt he was missing at home. Now, Dr. Maxwell Chen, an anesthesiologist, hurried by with his scrubs rustling. Dr. Rodriguez's voice echoed from inside the operating room, giving urgent instructions. Peter's insides knotted. He turned toward the waiting area where Kathy sat, hunched over, praying beneath her breath. He avoided her eyes, certain that her fury was like a dagger aimed at his conscience. Kathy, in turn, glared at him. Her face was still stained with tears. She thought about calling Charlotte's parents, but they lived across the country, and the last thing she wanted to do was add more heartbreak if Charlotte's condition took a turn for the worse. Instead, she mustered her courage and confronted Peter. "How could you? She's giving birth to your child, and you—" She couldn't even finish her sentence. Her disgust was palpable. He raked a hand through his hair, looking haggard. "Kathy, I never wanted it to happen like this," she scoffed. "So you did want it to happen, just not in this dramatic way. Did you ever think about Charlotte? Or is your mistress the only person whose feelings matter now?" He opened his mouth to defend himself, but the guilt lodged in his throat. At that moment, Eliza walked up, wearing the faintest smirk. "Peter, darling," she said, ignoring Kathy entirely. "Dr. Rodriguez said it might be a while. We should get you something to eat, or at least some coffee." Kathy's temper ignited. "Darling, don't you have an ounce of shame? His wife is on an operating table, fighting for her life and the baby's life." Eliza arched an eyebrow. "Peter is a grown man who can make his own decisions. He needs support, and I'm here to give it." Kathy's chest heaved. She nearly lost her composure, but instead she turned on her heel and marched away, not wanting to cause more of a scene in a hospital corridor. As she left, Peter stood frozen between the two women who represented two different trajectories of his life. But the moment was shattered by another voice, a nurse stepping out of the OR with a grave expression. "Mr. Hastings, could you come in? Charlotte is asking for you." The conflicting pull inside him was almost unbearable. He was furious at himself for feeling tethered to Eliza's presence. Before he could respond, Eliza latched onto his arm again. "Peter, don't." He pulled away, shooting her a quick, pleading look. "I need to see her. She's—" He trailed off, unable to articulate the swirl of emotions in his chest. Then, without a backward glance, he followed the nurse into the bright, sterile environment of the operating room. There, Charlotte lay on the operating table. A curtain separated her torso from the surgical site. Her face was pale as chalk, and tears had dried on her cheeks. The beep of monitors filled the silence, along with the rustle of the medical team working. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from behind her mask. "We have the baby out, Mr. Hastings." Her voice carried a note of cautious relief. "A boy very small, but we've got him stabilized. He'll be rushed to the NICU for further care." A strangled sob escaped Charlotte's lips. Peter peered beyond the curtain and saw a flurry of movement as a tiny, fragile form was handed off to a pediatric team. He stared in awe, tears pricking his eyes. That was his son, no bigger than a loaf of bread, flailing his newborn limbs in the terrifying world outside the womb. Charlotte gasped, "Peter, is he okay?" He nodded, voice trembling. "They're taking good care of him, Charlotte." She closed her eyes, relief flooding her features. Then a wave of pain seemed to crash over her, and the machines began to beep in alarm again. Her blood pressure plummeted. Dr. Rodriguez barked urgent orders. The awe erupted into frantic activity as Charlotte teetered on the edge of consciousness. Peter found himself shoved aside by the swirl of medical staff. He watched helplessly, fear slamming into him with the force of a tidal wave. Could Charlotte die? The possibility had never seemed real until now. He thought of how she had always brushed back her hair when she was concentrating, the warmth of her smile. When he succeeded, the tearful pride in her eyes when he bought her that first home after the IPO soared. Memories he thought had faded surged back, reminding him that there had been genuine love in their marriage. After several tense minutes, Dr. Rodriguez managed to stabilize Charlotte, though she remained weak and sedated. Exhaustion weighed heavily on Peter's chest as he realized how close she'd come to leaving him and leaving their newborn son motherless. Shaken, he left the operating room and re-entered the corridor to find Eliza waiting. Wordlessly, he walked past her, ignoring her outstretched hand. His mind was a storm of guilt, relief, and confusion. He didn't love Charlotte the way he once did, at least. That's what he had told himself. But seeing her on the brink of death and their premature son fighting for his life altered his perspective. With every step, he felt the eyes of doctors, nurses, and visitors on him. Whispers circulated. People recognized the celebrated tech mogul, accompanied by a glamorous companion who was clearly not his wife. The hush that followed him was laced with judgment. "Peter," Eliza whispered urgently, trotting after him as he made his way toward the NICU. "What's wrong? Why won't you talk to me?" He whirled around, eyes blazing with frustration. "My wife nearly died. My son is in an incubator, fighting to breathe, and I'm caught between. He inhaled shakily. "I just need some space." Her lips thinned. She wasn't accustomed to rejection, especially from the man who had claimed to care for her so deeply. "Don't forget the promises you made, Peter. We had plans, a life we'd build together once you were free." He ground his teeth. Guilt mingled with anger. He had made those promises, but not in the shadow of life or death stakes. Everything had changed in an instant. Not waiting for her response, he stormed toward the NICU. Through the large window, he saw the tiny baby boy in an incubator, connected to a tangle of tubes and monitors. Despite the grim circumstances, a sense of fierce protectiveness welled up within him. It was unlike anything he had felt before. For a moment, all his confusion melted into a singular purpose. "That's my son. He needs me to be strong." Meanwhile, in the recovery room where Charlotte was eventually moved, Kathy sat by her bedside, holding her friend's hand. The worst was over for now, but Charlotte's face was still colorless, and her breathing shallow. A nurse checked her vitals, indicating it would take time for her to regain strength. Kathy's heart squeezed in worry. She wondered if Peter's paternal instincts might triumph over the spell of Eliza. Was it possible that the near death of his wife and the vulnerable state of his newborn son could snap him back to reality? Or was his affair with Eliza too entrenched in lies and emotional distance? In the hush of that hospital night, with the storm still raging outside, no one had the answers. But the next few days would reveal the true measure of Peter's loyalty. Would Charlotte wake up to a husband determined to salvage their family, or discover that she had already lost him forever? The days that followed were a turbulent blur. Charlotte remained in the hospital, recovering from the emergency C-section and complications of preeclampsia. Though her condition improved, she was too weak to move much on her own. Her tiny son, named Alexander Hastings after Peter's suggestion, lay in the NICU, hooked up to machines that helped him breathe. Peter found himself dividing his time torn between Alexander's incubator and the unrelenting demands of Eliza, who had rented a suite at the nearby Ridgeway Grand Hotel. Eliza refused to return to her own life in Redwood City until Peter made a definitive choice. She called and texted constantly. Their relationship had always been thrilling and secretive, spicing up Peter's routine existence. But under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital hallways, the romance of it all dimmed, replaced by a tangible sense of moral debt. At first, Peter tried to be diplomatic. He asked Eliza to give him a week to sort things out. "Please understand, my son is in an incubator. My wife is recovering from major surgery," he told her, voice fatigued. "I can't make big decisions right now," but Eliza had never been one to settle for second place. She demanded he stand by his promises, leaving Charlotte finalizing a divorce and going public with their relationship. He was jolted to realize that Eliza wasn't willing to remain a secret any longer. Yet each time Peter peered at the tiny new life in the NICU, each time he glimpsed Charlotte's pale face, a flicker of doubt tugged at him. He couldn't just walk away without shouldering responsibility for the child he brought into this world, could he? He recalled how his own father had walked out on his mother when times got tough. Peter had vowed never to be that man. Now, ironically, he found himself on the brink of repeating history, treading a path disturbingly similar to the father he had despised. Meanwhile, word of the hospital drama spread among the Hastings family and close friends. Charlotte's sister, Miranda Carter, arrived from Glendale. Outraged by rumors of Peter's infidelity, she almost had to be restrained by hospital security when she spotted Eliza. "If you had 1 ounce of dignity, you'd leave Charlotte in peace," she hissed, her fury echoing through the waiting area. Eliza, no stranger to confrontation, shrugged with feigned indifference. This is between Peter and Charlotte. Not you, not anyone else. It's not just between them. Miranda shot back, eyes blazing. There's an innocent child who needs a father who can keep his vows. You're a homewrecker. Eliza shrugged, refusing to apologize for following her heart, or, more accurately, her ambition. The tension hung like a thundercloud over everyone involved. Even Dr. Rodriguez noticed the stress taking a toll on Charlotte's vital signs. She advised Charlotte to focus on healing, urging the staff to limit visitors as much as possible. One afternoon, Charlotte mustered the strength to confront Peter directly. Sitting up in her hospital bed, she shakily beckoned for him to approach. Kathy was nearby, but she stepped out to grant them privacy. Peter pulled up a chair, looking uncharacteristically disheveled with dark shadows under his eyes. "What's going on?" Charlotte's voice quivered. "I need the truth. Why was she with you that night? Were you planning to leave me, and you just thought you could do it after the baby was born?" Peter swallowed. The agony in Charlotte's gaze was like a knife. Slowly he nodded, unable to lie anymore. Charlotte, I made mistakes. We grew distant. I got involved with Eliza." Her voice cracked, tears threatening to fall. "How long?" "A year," he admitted, shame coloring his cheeks. "It started as business, but it became more." Charlotte closed her eyes, absorbing the blow. "A year," she whispered, "and you said nothing. You let me go through this pregnancy alone while you were with her." He clenched his hands. "I'm sorry," he muttered, though the words sounded hollow. "I didn't mean for it to go so far. I felt trapped. I was confused. But now," he paused, thinking of the NICU, thinking of the nights he had sat by Alexander's incubator. "Now it's different, Charlotte. The first see how fragile life is. And I don't want to abandon my son." She let out a bitter laugh that turned into a sob. "What about me? Are you staying for me? Or just because of him?" He said nothing. Silence fell between them, thick with unresolved pain. Charlotte took a shaky breath. "I still love you, Peter, but you've hurt me in ways I never thought possible. I'm not sure I can forgive you. Not yet." He hung his head. "I understand." Emotions churned inside her. On the one hand, she desperately wanted her family intact for Alexander. On the other, the betrayal burned, trust was shattered, and if Peter's heart truly belonged to Eliza, forcing him to stay would only prolong everyone's suffering. When he finally left the room, Charlotte stared at the window, where remnants of that storm lingered in the overcast sky. She was left with a swirl of despair. She had her child, her beautiful, fragile Alexander, but she had lost her sense of security. If Peter chose Eliza, what then? Would she be strong enough to raise a premature infant on her own, begin a new life free from a man who had torn her heart in two? Eliza Kent wasn't idle, while Charlotte and Peter wrestled with guilt and heartbreak. She spent her days scheming, weaving a narrative designed to ensure Peter remained by her side. She even reached out to a tabloid reporter under a pseudonym, dropping hints about the Hastings family scandal. If public opinion cast Charlotte as a pitiful, clingy wife, Eliza could swoop in to depict herself as the new woman who truly understood Peter's drive and vision. One evening, as Charlotte dozed restlessly in her hospital bed, Eliza seized an opportunity. She slipped past the nursing station and tapped lightly on the door, feigning concern. Kathy was in the cafeteria grabbing coffee, leaving Charlotte momentarily alone. Charlotte, half awake, blinked to find Eliza's silhouette outlined by the corridor light. Alarm spiked through her. Her grip on the betrayal tightened. "What are you doing here?" she murmured weakly. Eliza stepped in, letting the door close behind her. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." Her voice dripped with insincere sympathy. Charlotte glared. Exhaustion weighed on her, but anger stoked a small fire in her chest. "Don't play the caring stranger. We both know why you're here." Eliza smiled thinly. You don't look well, Charlotte. Are you sure it's best for you to stay in a marriage that's making you so miserable? Charlotte tried to sit up straighter, ignoring the discomfort in her abdomen. Stay away from me. You have no idea the stress you've caused. If you had any humanity, you'd leave Peter alone. That provoked a low, humorless chuckle from Eliza. Oh, Charlotte, you think it's that simple? If I left him alone, he'd come running after me. She paused, letting the words sink in. He told me how you cling to him, how you hold him back from the big ambitions he has for his future. Charlotte's face paled. She felt as if a cold hand squeezed her heart. You're lying. Peter would never say that. Eliza tossed her hair. Believe what you want, but I've spent a year with him. I know his fears and dreams intimately. I know how he hates being tied down. When your pregnancy happened, I think he felt even more trapped. Tears welled in Charlotte's eyes. It was too cruel, too brutal to handle in her weakened state. Yet she refused to let Eliza see her crumble. He has a son now, she whispered, a child who needs him. Eliza's lips twitched with something close to derision. True. But fatherhood is just one piece of a life. Peter's bigger ambitions revolve around expanding Hastings innovations, partnering with top-tier investors around the globe, traveling wherever business takes him, with no strings attached. Don't you see? I can give him that freedom. You're the weight around his neck. Charlotte swallowed hard, her pulse racing. She refused to believe Peter had so completely turned away from everything they once shared. But Eliza's words pricked at the raw edges of her insecurities, feeding the gnawing fear that maybe she was the reason. Peter felt so cornered. Eliza stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Why fight a losing battle, Charlotte? You nearly died giving birth. Focus on recovering, be grateful for your child, and let Peter go. If you try to hold on, he'll only resent you more. Charlotte's trembling hands balled into fists. Get out, she said, voice trembling with anger. Leave me alone. Eliza inclined her head, a mocking semblance of courtesy. Take care of yourself, Charlotte. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. As she left, her coat brushed the door frame like the swish of a passing storm. Moments later, Kathy returned to find Charlotte breathing hard, tears quivering on her lashes. What happened? Kathy asked, alarmed. Charlotte struggled to speak, her voice coming out in a choked whisper. Eliza, she was here. She said things about Peter, about me. Kathy cursed under her breath. That woman has no decency. I'm getting security next time. She sank into the chair by Charlotte's bed, gently stroking her friend's arm in comfort. But the damage was done. Seeds of doubt sprouted in Charlotte's mind. The rawness of postpartum vulnerability left her ill-equipped to handle the cruelty of a mistress determined to seize control. That night, Charlotte barely slept, each pang of her surgical stitches echoed by a deeper ache in her heart. While Charlotte hovered on the edge of exhaustion, Peter was summoned by his attorney, Luke Henderson, to discuss urgent legal matters. Word had spread that Eliza might go public if Peter didn't make a move. That could severely impact Hastings Innovations' reputation and stock prices. Corporate attorneys were on high alert, urging Peter to contain the scandal before it wreaked havoc on the brand he'd spent years building. Sitting in the corner conference room of the hospital's administrative wing, Peter listened to Luke outline a possible path forward. It involved an expedited divorce, discreet financial settlement with Charlotte, and a non-disclosure agreement to keep the messy details under wraps. All of it made Peter's stomach churn. But Luke was relentless, describing the threat to the company if the tabloids got hold of the story. As if to underscore the urgency, he placed a stack of documents on the table. Peter flipped through them, feeling as though he were reading the script to end a life he had once cherished. The cost of extricating himself from Charlotte was monstrous, not just financially, but emotionally. He pictured little Alexander in the NICU and clenched his jaw. How could he walk away? Luke tapped a pen against the table. I'm not saying you have to file for divorce immediately, but we need a strategy. You can't remain in limbo. If Eliza goes public, your brand's image could take a major hit. Investors hate uncertainty. And you don't want a nasty court battle with Charlotte. Trust me. Peter's head throbbed. Eliza had him cornered, the board had him cornered, and even his own sense of guilt had him cornered. He asked for time to think, brushing aside Luke's push for a swift decision. Later that day, Peter visited the NICU. A nurse allowed him a few minutes of skin-to-skin contact with Alexander. Carefully, he sat in a rocking chair while the nurse helped place his fragile son against his chest. The baby's heartbeat was quick, fluttering like a hummingbird's wings. In that moment, Peter felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness. It was as if the baby's warmth ignited a dormant part of his soul, forcing him to confront the moral abyss he'd been drifting toward. Tears unexpectedly welled in Peter's eyes. He hadn't cried since he was a child, but now every misdeed, every betrayal weighed on him. Alexander was so small, so vulnerable. The boy needed parents who could fight for him, love him, and keep him safe, if not together, then at least with unity of heart. A soft voice spoke from behind him. He turned to see Dr. Rodriguez, her face kind but stern. He's strong, she said, nodding to the baby. But this will be a journey. Preemie babies often have challenges. He'll need both of you. Peter understood the unspoken message. As a father, you have a responsibility that transcends your selfish desires. He gently handed Alexander back, his throat tight. He made his way to Charlotte's room, bracing himself. Upon entering, he found her awake, though pale. She turned her head toward him, her eyes guarded. She was still reeling from Eliza's visit, though she hadn't told Peter about it. The tension crackled between them. Alexander's doing better, he said quietly, attempting a smile. She nodded. A small flicker of relief crossed her features. Good. I was worried about him. They fell into silence. Finally, Peter took a step closer. Charlotte, I need to know what you want truly, because the attorneys are pressuring me. The scandal. She swallowed hard. I want my son to have a father who cares for him. More than that, I want a husband who respects me. But if you can't be that man, then, her voice wavered, I won't force you to stay in a loveless marriage. Peter's chest clenched. He remembered how he used to admire Charlotte's fiery spirit, the confidence she wore like a shield during his early investor meetings. Now, even weakened by surgery, her resolve shone through. She wasn't begging him, she was giving him a choice, one that came with enormous consequences. He reached for her hand, but she drew away. He cleared his throat. I haven't slept in days, Charlotte. I feel like I'm at war with myself. Part of me thinks I should walk away. But then, I remember how we used to be, and seeing Alexander, it's changed something in me. An ember of hope flared in her eyes, but she quickly subdued it. You can't expect me to forget what you've done just because you're having second thoughts. You were with her for a year, Peter. A year of lies. Where was your remorse then? He winced. I know, I don't expect an easy fix. But maybe we can. Try therapy. I'm willing to do anything it takes. The confession felt raw. He wasn't sure if he was driven by guilt, fatherly duty, or a rekindling of the love he once had for Charlotte. Probably all three. She studied him, uncertainty etched in every line of her face. Then she asked the question that weighed most heavily on her heart. What about Eliza? His stomach knotted. He hesitated. I told her I need to focus on you and Alexander. She doesn't like it, but she said she'll wait until I figure things out. Charlotte suppressed a bitter laugh. She'll wait, will she? That's comforting. He had no rebuttal. The silence lengthened. Eventually, Charlotte's nurse entered, interrupting them. Peter took that as his cue to leave. Outside, he found Eliza waiting once again. She'd come to the hospital nearly every day, either to see him or to check if he'd decided anything. "Did you talk to her about the divorce?" Eliza asked, arms crossed over her designer blouse. He sighed, exhaustion coloring his voice. "She's recovering from surgery. We discussed possibilities. But I'm not filing for divorce now, Eliza. There's a baby involved." She frowned, stepping closer. "You're letting your guilt cloud your judgment. If you drag it out, she'll find a way to keep you trapped." He shook his head. "Not now," he muttered, striding away before she could snare him in another argument. Inside, behind the hospital room's door, Charlotte pressed trembling fingers to her closed eyes. She wanted to believe Peter's remorse was genuine, but how much heartbreak could she withstand? As Charlotte regained physical strength, she was given permission to visit Alexander in the NICU. The first time she saw her son outside of her hospital bed, tears flowed freely. Though still fragile, he was improving, a testament to modern medicine and the resilience of newborns. A nurse guided Charlotte, who was in a wheelchair, close to the incubator. Gently, she slipped a hand inside, letting her fingertip brush her son's tiny palm. Alexander reflexively gripped her finger, and Charlotte's heart swelled with fierce maternal love. Over the next week, Charlotte and Peter both found themselves by the incubator, albeit at different times. Their marriage hung in a precarious balance, overshadowed by the demands of caring for a preemie. Neither had the energy for more volatile arguments. A civil, if strained, truce descended, but the undercurrent of tension never ebbed. Meanwhile, Eliza's patience wore thin. One evening, she cornered Peter in a deserted hospital corridor, eyes blazing with frustration. "I'm done waiting, Peter. If you won't make a public move, I'll do it myself." She brandished a glossy magazine mock-up on her phone, depicting a sensational headline: "Billionaire's betrayal, tech mogul caught between wife and mistress." Peter's throat dried up. "Eliza, you can't. This could ruin everything. Not just the business, but..." She lifted her chin defiantly. "Then do something. Prove I'm not just a fling. Sign the divorce papers, go public with me, or I'm leaking this story. Believe me, I have the reporter on speed dial. I'll paint Charlotte as an unfit wife who's refusing to let you go. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my investment in you." Her words slashed at him. He felt cornered again, but this time, the pressure from Eliza's threat was overshadowed by the mental image of Charlotte's tear-streaked face and Alexander's fragile form. A surge of anger rose in Peter's chest. "You'd risk the company, my child, everything, for your own ambition," he spat. "I thought you cared about me, but it looks like you just want your name in lights." She gave him a stony look. "I care about us, but I won't be manipulated either. It's your move. I suggest you hurry." With that ultimatum, she turned on her heel and strode away, her designer heels echoing on the hospital floor. Peter watched her go, torn between disgust, fear, and a lingering vestige of attraction he couldn't deny. That night, after hours in the NICU, Peter summoned Luke Henderson. They met in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He laid out Eliza's threat. Luke's jaw tightened. "Peter, if she goes public, you'll be dealing with more than just personal humiliation. Investors could back out. You might lose board confidence. On top of that, Charlotte could file for a public, nasty divorce." Peter pressed his fingers to his temples. "I can't do that to Charlotte or to Alexander. They don't deserve to be smeared in the tabloids." Luke hesitated. "Then it's time to call Eliza's bluff. If you truly want to salvage your marriage, let me handle Eliza. We can draft a restraining order if necessary if she tries to blackmail you, or we can try a settlement to keep her quiet. But you need to be absolutely certain who you're choosing." The next day, Peter returned to Charlotte's hospital room, sweaty palms and a pounding heart. She looked up, studying him warily. He cleared his throat. "Charlotte, I I want to propose something. Something that might give us a chance. She steeled herself. Go on, he swallowed. We both need time. Time to see if we can rebuild trust, or at least come to terms with co-parenting. Let's move forward with a separation, not a full divorce. We can get therapy, couples counseling. I'll move out of the house temporarily. I'll keep supporting you and Alexander, of course. And I'll cut ties with Eliza. Her eyes widened. You'd cut ties with her? Really? His shoulders slumped, as though releasing a great weight. Yes. I don't want to live like this, lying and hurting everyone involved. She's threatening to go public, but Luke is handling it. I'm choosing to stand by you and Alexander, if you'll let me. Charlotte's mind whirled. She could sense the gravity behind his words. Peter was offering a sliver of hope for their broken marriage, but not an immediate reunion. It was an acknowledgement of the deep fractures between them. A separation would protect her from living under the same roof with a man whose betrayal still cut fresh. But was it enough? She rubbed the bandage on her arm, feeling the fourth port beneath the tape. So many thoughts swirled in her tired brain. She did love him, she always had, but trust had been shattered and forgiveness wouldn't come overnight. She needed proof that he was truly finished with Eliza, that this wasn't some half-hearted attempt to contain a scandal. All right, she said softly, her voice trembling. A separation. We'll do therapy. And no more contact with Eliza unless it's purely to finalize legal matters. She paused, a tear slipping down her cheek. But understand, Peter, if you break your word again, if you hurt me and Alexander, we're done. He moved closer, gently taking her hand, though she didn't fully return the gesture. I understand, he whispered. I'm sorry, and I'll do whatever it takes. That night, in a different wing of the hospital, Eliza learned of Peter's decision secondhand. Seething with rage, she vowed to make one final move, one that would either bring Peter back to her for good or destroy his carefully laid plans to salvage his marriage. Charlotte was finally discharged from the hospital, though her son, Alexander, remained in the NICU. Weary and emotionally drained, she returned to the Birchwood Lane mansion, now an echoing reminder of broken trust. Peter honored their agreed separation by moving to a nearby condo, juggling daily NICU visits and the rising tension at Hastings Innovations. Meanwhile, Eliza Kent's patience wore thin. One afternoon, she cornered Peter in a hospital corridor, her voice taut with anger. Brandishing a manila envelope, she pulled out photos of their affair, intimate moments, damning messages ready to ruin him publicly if he refused to leave Charlotte. Peter's heart hammered. He'd spent nights holding tiny Alexander, feeling the boy's fragile heartbeat and vowing to do right by his family. Faced with Eliza's ultimatum divorce, Charlotte now, or lose your reputation forever, he realized his silence had fed her power. Overcoming his shame, he made the only choice his conscience allowed. Do your worst, he said quietly. But this ends now. Eliza's furious gaze darted to Charlotte, who stood beside him, weak from surgery, yet resolute. Charlotte's voice, though trembling, was unwavering. You can't force love with blackmail, she told Eliza, and you'll never win respect through threats. After a tense beat of silence, Eliza flung the incriminating envelope at Peter's feet. Then, with one bitter glare, she disappeared down the corridor, her heels echoing like distant thunder. In the aftermath, Peter knelt to gather the scattered photos. Staff and visitors stared, but neither he nor Charlotte cared anymore. The lies were laid bare, and they could finally begin to heal, or at least try. Holding his breath, Peter looked at Charlotte, seeing both hurt and unexpected resolve. Despite the uncertainty ahead, the worst secrets were out in the open. A fragile hope flickered that, from this moment forward, honesty would guide them both. The drama that unfolded in Ridgeway General Hospital changed everything for Charlotte and Peter Hastings. From near-death experiences in the operating room to shocking betrayals in a public corridor, they confronted shattered trust and faced life's harshest realities head-on. Ultimately, their story is a testament to love's complexity, how it can waver, break, and still find a fragile path toward redemption. For Charlotte, reclaiming her own strength became the key to moving forward, whether that path meant learning to forgive or finding a whole new beginning. Their infant son, Alexander, serves as the beacon that guides them both, reminding them that hope can endure even the fiercest storms. If this emotional roller coaster gripped your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. There's more high-stakes drama and real-life stories coming your way. Stay tuned for the next chapter of jaw-dropping twists.